Depending on where you live in Canada, the housing market right now looks like two completely different stories. In Ontario, especially Toronto, condo market under serious pressure. Prices have been falling. Investors are pulling back. Thousands of units are sitting unsold as buyers struggle with high interest rates and economic uncertainty. And meanwhile, in Quebec, story's pretty different. Montreal and Quebec, they're seeing some price growth in many sectors of the market, especially for single-family homes, even as condo activity begins to soften slightly. Let's get a lay of the land of the Canadian housing market with someone who really knows this business. Ron Butler is host of the Angry Mortgage podcast, and of course, he's a mortgage broker at Butler Mortgage. Ron, welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
And I know earlier this month, you actually spoke at a parliamentary committee, right? So why don't we start there? In front of the Parliamentary Finance Committee, what was the message you had to Canada's leaders?
The message was the profound unfairness that exists in this country when it comes to the ability to buy houses. If we look back 40 years, it was almost effortless for average working people to buy a home right away. Right, get out of school, get established in a job, and buy a house. That has disappeared, and we need to question why it's disappeared. Why do we have the same thing in place for nearly 100 years, and then suddenly since 2009 it's become an impossibility, and the average house price in a province like Ontario is close to $1 million? How does that make any sense? And that was my plea to parliamentarians, that we have to think about ways to get young Canadians on an even playing field with their parents and their grandparents.
Ron, when I bring up this subject on my program, I hear immediately back from listeners. I'm going to have it happen right now as we talk here. Some people are like, I bought my house for 5 cents. Others point out, I still had to save up for it, and interest rates were 20%. So, I wonder how you unpack that, because many people would agree with you. Boy, it was so much simpler. Others would say, we're romanticizing what we saw in the past.
Well, and I'm in the boomer generation myself, and some of us boomers always want to accuse young people of their addiction to lattes and avocado toast. Yeah. This is a complete canard. It's a falsehood. The reality of that high interest environment was for a period of about 4.5 years. So what happened for the rest of the time when that house you bought was like $100,000, and now today it's worth $1.6 million? There's just no excuse for this. There's no talking out of it. And besides, interest rates change all the time, but the base price you paid for the home at that time represented about 2.5 times your income. Today, that's 9, 10, or 11 times your income. In Quebec, it's about 7 times. It's still completely unfair.
So, and 7 times your income, 9 times, 11 times ago, that's just unbelievable. And how does anyone afford a home without help? And I hear from real estate agents, well, how are people buying? They're getting help from the bank of mommy and daddy for the down payment and other things here. I want to ask you about what's going on in Toronto, because I wonder if Toronto is canary in the coal mine, or if there are moats in the rest of the country. When we look at the condo apocalypse, and maybe somehow some single family homes, they're dropping in value in the Toronto area. How do you view that? Do you think what we've seen in Toronto will radiate to the rest of the country?
Well, to a certain extent, it has. And we're talking really severe price reductions in the high-rise condo. I refer to as the dog crate condo market. We've seen reductions recently with the introduction of new companies which are coming in. One of them's from Montreal, Just a Group, coming into Toronto and sweeping up 40, 50, 60 units at a time of unsold condominiums from developers who are stuck with them. They're paying half the price of the original, 50% off the original retail price that the condo was pre-sold for way back in 2020, and then waiting for the construction to finish. Half price. I mean, that's a 50%, a massive discount. We see other regions of Ontario, specific cities in Ontario, where we've seen 40% reduction in prices. British Columbia, we're in parts of Vancouver, particularly in the Fraser Valley, we've seen significant discounting. And you're right, Quebec has been basically so far a very good news story, both in Montreal, particularly in Quebec City, which has actually led the country in price appreciation in the last 18 months.
And I wonder if that's, well, it's just catching up. Like it's because it hadn't risen before, so there's room to give. When we look at, the cost of a home compared to what someone makes, there's lots of room for growth in places like Quebec City.
There is, and a certain amount of credit has to be given to the provincial government's long-standing policy on immigration, where they limited immigration. In Ontario in 2023. 460,000 newcomers arrived to put enormous pressure on the housing market.
Yeah.
In Quebec, a significant, it's pretty much standardized around 50,000 to 60,000 people. So,
Ron, let me ask you something. Let me ask. Sorry to cut you off, but let me ask something because I want to highlight what you're talking about, because there are certain federal politicians, and there are certain people that come on my station, join our panel discussions. When you bring up the fact that not immigration in general, but numbers of immigrants impact the cost of homes, they point a finger at you. They call you immigrant blamers. They call you all types of words in the book there to try and get you to shut up on the subject. Can we talk about this? Like, in your estimation, it is fair to link the numbers of immigrants with how some places have been affected on the housing front?
I think it's always fair to employ mathematics. Always fair. So if you've got a province, with 16 million people in it, and you introduce 460,000, that on a percentage basis, that's gonna have a major impact. If you have a province of 9 million people that introduces 50,000 newcomers, that has a more muted impact. That's math. That's not xenophobia. That's not commentary on an immigration policy. I support immigration. I always have for my whole life, and I'm old. But you can just do the math. If you inject an enormous number of newcomers in a very short period of time, you will have an impact on housing and rents. That's just math.
Ron, knowing what you know, to wrap up here, what's your advice to those who, listen, maybe their home is growing, babies are coming, they're looking at life changes, they need to buy, and they see a lot of uncertainty. What's your advice to them?
My advice would be, if you are absolutely forced to buy by life circumstances, the prices are at least they're down significantly from 2022 in Ontario, British Columbia, and even starting to drop in southern Alberta. But if you don't have an absolute requirement to buy, don't buy. In 6 months, those prices will be less.
Ron, we'll leave it there. I think a lot of people will be heeding your advice. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Ron Butler is host of the Angry Mortgage podcast, and he's a mortgage broker at Butler Mortgage.
Unmistakably Canadian.
It's the music that raised you.
The artists raising the bar.
Hi, this is Brian Adams.
Hey, my name's Brett Emmons. I'm from the Glorious Sons.
Hi, I'm Nelly Furtado.
Made in Canada. The station that champions Canadian music.
Loud, proud, and all yours.
No passports required. Just press play.
Tap into Made in Canada now on iHeartRadio.ca
or the free iHeartRadio app.